Hello everyone, I would like to welcome you to my presentation, which is going to be about American literature. We will look at some of the well-known authors, some of the well-known books as well. And yeah, let's jump right into it. Hope you will enjoy it. Firstly, I would like to clear up what is going to be the content of my presentation. I wanted this presentation to serve for you as a sort of an overview, so you can see how massive the American literature actually is. That means that I'm not going to focus on just one specific authors. I will include, in my opinion, the most important writers in that from America. And I'm very sorry, but among them there is not going to be a Twilight series. And we are kicking off from the 19th century. When talking about the evolution of American literature, I don't think we can see much of a difference from Europe. Unsurprisingly, there was a huge influence from European writers. So even here in America, you can see styles such as romanticism, realism, and so on. What is quite interesting in my opinion was that the authors from America were often anti-British oriented people, and later they even have anti-racist elements, or they used anti-racist elements in their works. Also, there was more and more factographic literature than, for example, fictional literature. We can name several authors such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And one note worth mentioning is definitely that there is one philosophical style that came from America, and which was pragmatism. Pragmatism you can know from our very popular Czech author Karel Čapek, which who heavily used pragmatism's thoughts in their in his books. Sorry. And now let's finally talk about some authors who I chose to be in this presentation. Firstly, I will talk something about everyone's favorite Edgar Allan Poe, who was a novelist and a poet. Poe is mostly known for his short stories, which are significant for their mysterious, eerie, and scary atmosphere. When we are talking about Poe, we are basically talking about the beginning of horror, crime stories, and sci-fi literature. But also, it wouldn't be quite fair for him to say that he just wrote some scary stuff. He also wrote several humorous stories, and this is some information which I didn't know myself before a few days. So right now I'm quite interested to read them. Unfortunately for him, he had many troubles with alcohol, drugs, and he suffered from depression, which was probably the main cause of his death. Because in 1849 he was found drunk, lying on the street, and after they hospitalized him, he fell into the coma from which he didn't wake up. To list some of his work, I definitely need to mention The Fall of the House of Usher, or Murders in the Rue Morgue, which I especially picked because of the character Detective Dupin. Fun fact, this character Detective Dupin was a huge inspiration for Arthur Conan Doyle to write Sherlock Holmes stories. Another story we have The Pit and the Pendulum. Sorry, there shouldn't be not. There is definitely and pendulum. The Telltale Heart, or everyone's favorite poem, Raven, um, which was basically his only success among people and critics during his life. Next up is Mark Twain. Well, I don't want to spend much time on Mark Twain because we don't have much time, but I would like to mention some things that I found very interesting. For example, that he was a good friend with Nikola Tesla. You can actually see Mark Twain in Tesla's laboratory, and in the background we can even notice Tesla himself. And the next thing interesting about Mark Twain is is that his relationship with Halley's Comet. It was basically, or this relationship was about that Mark Twain was born on the year when Halley's Comet was near or was flying next to our planet, and his wish, his ultimate wish was that he will die. Um, he will die on the day when the Halley's Comet will be again, when the Halley's Comet will be again near to Earth, and this wish actually worked, and he died on the day when Halley's Comet, on one of the days that Halley's Comet was seen on the sky. From Twain's work, we can definitely talk about Gilded Age, which is basically a satire, or his most famous novels or books are definitely that you definitely or know are Adventures of Tom Sawyer or Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And now let's talk about the poets. Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman is probably one of the most influential poets on later works in poetry. Even though I don't think in Europe or in among Czech people the name Whitman is much known. Now, what can I say about him? He usually relied on the idea of the freedom, and we can definitely see it in his works. He uses his poems doesn't have a clear structure. He uses a lot of free verse and a huge amount of metaphors. His most famous book or the collection of poems is Leaves of Grass, which contains exactly 396 poems. Here, feel free to pause the video and enjoy reading one of Whitman's most famous poem, which is called "Oh Captain, My Captain." This would be everything for the 19th century. Now let's move to the 20th century. Let's start with F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was a novelist, and to change things a little bit up, he was also a screenwriter. Because of his experience in World War I, he's considered to be a part of the group called Lost Generation, but that's, in my opinion, quite discutable because in his works he's dealing with quite a different themes than other authors from this group. So I don't know if I classified him there. What is definitely quite interesting is his lifetime love, Zelda Sayre, who was also a writer, but the relationship with her has to be quite complicated, not that easy, because Zelda suffered from not so nice mental diseases, mental health diseases, such as schizophrenia and depression. In his works, in his books, he's tackling with high society and the optimistic age, which was literally filled, which was definitely America filled with, and also the age in which Fitzgerald lived is now called as a jazz age because of the moves and the parties and the wild parties which were during that time. I think you all know the Fitzgerald's most famous book, Great Gatsby. It's about this rich guy, Jay Gatsby, who organizes these crazy parties in order to get his loved one, Daisy. What is also quite interesting that this book predicted the Great Depression and the whole end of this optimistic mood in the 20s or in the roaring 20s. Yeah, next books we can mention Tender is the Night or The Laugh of the Last Tycoon, which is a work that he never finished because of his death. Next on my list is Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway is definitely a member of the Lost Generation. I must say, he has one of the most interesting biography among other authors. He was that kind of person who constantly sought the big amount of adrenaline, the danger. We can, for example, talk about his participation in World War One, his wild life in Paris, his many affairs with women. Later, he was also a big fan of hunting, wild animal hunting in Africa, and those things gained him big or more very much life experiences that he definitely projects in his novels. His short description style is significant for him, and thanks to that we can talk about a thing which is called iceberg theory. Also, he won. What is worth mentioning is that he won a Nobel Prize. From his works, I can definitely name Farewell to Arms or For Whom the Bell Tolls, but the last, but certainly not least, is An Old Man and the Sea, which practically gained him a Nobel Prize. This book tells the story of a Cuban fisherman Santiago, who tries to catch a giant marlin. This book, from other in comparison from his other works, definitely steps out with his philosophical themes, and also I can mention that I mean, this was like completely random and unnecessary information that I found on Wikipedia, but I decided to include it here as well, and that An Old Man and the Sea was a favorite book of Saddam Hussein. And the another one is John Steinbeck, who was a novelist and journalist. Similar to Hemingway, he also had many life experiences, mainly as some of his characters in the book. He worked also as a worker, and this life experiences also definitely he also he also projects these experiences to his books. His stories usually takes place after the Great Depression, and he kind of uncovers the consequences that came with that age. And also, his stories are usually took place in California. He's well known for his social criticism and his inspiration. He often found inspiration. He often found inspiration from biblical stories and themes. Um, um, the main themes or the trademarks which are essential in his books are definitely friendship, poverty, and misery. And like Hemingway, he also won Nobel Prize. From his works, I can name Of Mice and Men from 1947, which is a book that you probably all read. Then we have The Grapes of Wrath and East of Eden. I also on this slide I included photos from movies from adaptations of movie adaptations of his books. In the upper corner we can see Of Mice and the movie Of Mice and Men from 1992, I believe, and in the lower corner we can see a scene from movie The Grapes of Wrath. And lastly, I would like to talk about the movement called, or the famous rebellious movement called Beat Generation. There was, I would say, it's like the most famous poetry movement to this day. It came from America, from young American poets. They definitely have a great influence to this day, and his main themes that they often promoted were, for example, drugs, alcohol. They were big fans of jazz, so jazz in their works or poems plays a huge role, and also they were often inspired by Zen Buddhism. They also participated in beginning of hippies, and in their works they like to break they like to deep to delve into several taboo themes which I mentioned before. The most famous representative of this movement is definitely the poet Allen Ginsberg. From Allen Ginsberg, we know that he was quite a good student, firstly, but after he made friends with wrong people, he got expelled from Columbia College. In this case, it was, I believe, because of some criminal activity. After that, he seemed as a rebellious artist, and from his poems we can see that he was a big fan of mm, many, or big fan of experimenting with, for example, hallucinogenic drugs and many other definitely non-legal stuff. His most famous poem is called The Howl from 1956, and that would be probably it from him. And now I added to this presentation a uh, short example from the poem Howl. It's right from the beginning, so feel free to pause the video and read it. Next one is William Seward Burroughs. Listen, I know I said that Ernest Hemingway has one of the most interesting biographies among other famous writers, but William Seward Burroughs is that one who has the most interesting biography. Let's just go on Wikipedia and you know what I mean. He has that like crazy, yet so much that crazy stuff that he went through. It's unbelievable. He was a drug addict, probably on everything that you can name. He probably killed his wife in front of his son when he was trying to imitate the scene from Willem Tell. Yes, he put an apple on her head and he tried to shoot it, but fortunately it didn't go very well. And we can also mention that he loved Shakespeare so much that he could quote different parts uh, uh, from basically from I think almost from every play or sonnet that Shakespeare wrote. He was hugely influenced by surrealism. His novels definitely contains satirical elements, and also he is the founder, or he invented the term cyberpunk. Uh, his most famous novels are probably Naked Lunch and Junkie. Naked Lunch is also a movie directed by David Cronenberg. I didn't see this movie, but I know that there is. I saw some pictures from it, and on the right from this William Seward's portrait, you can see some pictures of this movie. You can see these like crazy creatures, uh, and the movie is basically filled with them. And last writer that I have in my presentation is Jack Kerouac. He was also a member of Beauty Generation, but uh, what is interesting about him is that he could become a football player, but after several years on college, he quickly lost his interest in football, and instead of that, he uh, became an artist. Um, in, com- in comparison with other beatniks, we can say that he was much more restrained. For example, he didn't experiment it with some stronger drugs. He just stayed on the level of alcohol and marijuana. Paradoxically enough, please notice that he died almost 30 years earlier than the other two. I don't know what can I say about it. Just it's interesting. And definitely his most famous work is is the novel On the Road. Fun fact: Kerouac wrote the novel on one roll of paper, which still exists, and I think it's in Paris in some museum. So that would be it for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for your attention.